Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the final, brutal, and frankly transformative act of the American Civil War. This wasn't just about battles. This was a period that completely reshaped what it meant to be American, only to end with a single gunshot that changed the course of history. So let's trace this journey from a pivotal speech to a national tragedy.
All right, so we've broken this down into 5 key acts. We're going to start in 1863, the year the tide of the war really turned for good. Then we'll see how the very purpose of the war changed, dive into the final, brutal campaigns, look at the moment of surrender, and finally, explore the shocking event that happened right after.
So picture this. It's the summer of 1863. The entire fate of the nation is hanging by a thread. And it all comes down to 2 massive, absolutely epic battles raging at the exact same time, hundreds of miles apart from each other. These 2 victories together would become the turning point from which the Confederacy could never recover.
Out west, you had the long, grinding siege of Vicksburg, and in the east, the explosive, bloody fields of Gettysburg. One was a slow, strategic squeeze play, and the other was an all-out 3-day brawl. But their combined effect? Well, it was the 1-2 punch that basically knocked out the Confederacy's grand ambitions for good.
So let's really dig into what Grant did here at Vicksburg. This was not about one big heroic charge. No, he surrounded the city, used his navy to cut off any supplies from the river, and then had his army dig in. For 47 grueling days, they just bombarded the city relentlessly. In the end, Vicksburg was starved into surrender. And just like that, the Union had full control of the Mississippi River, literally splitting the Confederacy in 2.
But that victory at Gettysburg, man, it was soaked in blood. It left a field of ghosts. So 4 months later, President Lincoln stood on that very ground. He wasn't just there to mourn the dead. He was there to give their sacrifice a powerful, brand new meaning in a speech that honestly would echo through all of American history.
And get this, the speech was incredibly short, just 272 words. But in that brief moment, Lincoln did something absolutely profound. He connected the brutal fight they were in directly to the nation's founding principles. He basically reframed the entire war as a test. Could a nation conceived in liberty actually survive? He argued they were fighting to prove that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, would not in fact perish from the earth.
So, what does this all mean? It means he elevated the whole conflict. This wasn't just about territory anymore, it was about ideals. It became a fight for liberty, for a nation where all people could be free. It was a fight for equality, to finally live up to that founding promise. And it was a fight for the Union itself, to stitch the nation back together, hopefully stronger than it was before.
Okay, let's jump forward to 1864. This new sense of purpose is now going to be matched with a relentless, brutal new military strategy. Lincoln has finally found the general who he believes can finish the job.
And that general was Ulysses S. Grant. You see, Grant's plan was devastatingly simple. He would attack Robert E. Lee's army, and after the battle, unlike all the Union generals before him, he wouldn't retreat. He would just keep moving forward and attack again. He knew he had more men and more supplies, and he was willing to suffer staggering casualties to simply grind down the Confederate army through constant, nonstop pressure.
Meanwhile, another Union general was about to unleash a terrifying new concept, taking the war not just to the Confederate Army, but to its entire society.
That concept was total war, and it was unleashed by General William Tecumseh Sherman. After his army captured Atlanta, they began their infamous March to the Sea. This wasn't about fighting soldiers anymore. They waged war on the whole Confederate home front, destroying railroads, burning farms, wrecking factories. The goal was twofold: cripple the South's ability to fight, and maybe even more importantly, completely crush their will to keep fighting.
So, by the spring of 1865, it's pretty much over. The Confederacy is collapsing, Grant has Lee's army cornered in Virginia, and the end is clearly in sight. And so the focus starts to shift from winning the war to the absolutely monumental task of reuniting the nation.
Now, a victory all but guaranteed, you'd expect a triumphant, maybe even boastful speech from Lincoln, right? A victory lap. But he did the exact opposite. In his second inaugural address, he spoke of sorrow, of shared guilt, and of healing. He called on the nation to act, in his unforgettable words, with malice toward none, with charity for all. He was setting the stage for a peace built on compassion, not on punishment.
And Grant immediately put that vision into action.
I mean, look at the terms he offered when Lee finally surrendered. The Confederate soldiers weren't thrown in prison or publicly humiliated. They just had to lay down their weapons, and then they were sent home. Grant even told them to keep their horses so they could do the spring planting. This wasn't about crushing an enemy, it was about welcoming back fellow countrymen.
The war was over. The capital was celebrating. The nation was breathing this huge collective sigh of relief. But just as that was happening, a single act of violence was about to plunge everyone right back into shock and mourning.
It was just 5 days after Lee's surrender. A war-weary President Lincoln decided he needed a night out, a chance to relax. He went to attend a comedy playing at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C.
And there, in the theater, a well-known actor and Confederate sympathizer named John Wilkes Booth snuck into the presidential box and fired a single shot into the back of Lincoln's head. The president died the next morning. And just like that, at the very moment the nation needed him most, the one leader who had the moral authority and the vision for a merciful reunion was gone.
And that act leaves us with one of history's most haunting what-ifs. The key takeaway here isn't just the sequence of events. It's understanding the immense impact of a single leader. Lincoln's vision for a peace built on charity for all was tragically silenced, and in its absence, the incredibly difficult, painful, and often violent process of Reconstruction would begin. How different might things have been? Well, that's a question we can only wonder about.